Thank you so much, Carrie, again for the warm introduction. We are very excited to be back again with the community, and we're very excited that people are joining from all around the world to hear today a little, to get a glimpse of the business ROI and value of Agile methods. Let's go ahead and get right to it. I think, again, Carrie went through the background, so I'm going to skip my slide. A lot of you know who I am. Dr. Rico, I am so excited to have you with us today. When I was thinking about this webinar and this topic of how do we in an hour be able to sort of summarize to a lot of people around the world what is really the value of Agile, why are organizations moving this way, and what are the statistics in terms of actual adoption and proof that it really works. I couldn't think of anyone better than the person who wrote the book on the ROI of Agile method. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, Dr. Rico.
Well, I work for Boeing as a systems engineer at Fort Meade, where we help oversee a portfolio of about $20 million worth of IT projects. Like Carrie said, I specialize in return on investment, primarily in project management and systems development methods. And I've been writing about Agile for nearly a decade. So really, I think that pretty much summarizes it.
How long did it take for you to gather all the data and write your book on the business value of Agile software methods? I'm curious.
Well, that was probably the culmination of about 4 years. Once we had done the research, we were able to summarize it and write the book in about a year.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have you and to have you share some of your research and your studies. We are going to attempt today to answer the following questions. Does Agile work? Show me the proof. A lot of executives, a lot of leaders and managers that are still skeptic about Agile want to see proof that Agile really works. What problems are we trying to solve? So why does Agile actually work? What are the common problems and areas of challenges that organizations are facing that Agile is really attempting to address? A lot of people ask me, show me companies and industries that are using Agile, Sally. Can Agile work for non-software is a common question that we get. Does Agile fail? Why and how does it fail? And then the wonderful, I've heard X about Agile, is it really true? And then finally, how do I convince my boss that we need to move to Agile? So those are sort of high-level agenda, not in the specific order that we're going to go through for the day. I do want to give you a warning. Because you are coming to a webinar that's around the ROI of Agile, it most likely will result in something like this. So you're going to feel overwhelmed with data, but that's the kind of webinar that you've come to. Our goal from this webinar was to just provide the hard proof of Agile and its adoption and statistics of its working, and the failure rates and why. So again, be prepared to be overwhelmed. So, Dr. Rico, can you tell us a little bit about this slide in terms of global project failure?
Well, this is a really important slide here. The graph on the left here with the green, yellow, and red, this shows the historical project success and failure rates for the last 2 decades. It's by Standish, and it basically shows in red that roughly about 1 out of every 3 projects over the last 23 years has just failed outright. Okay, the yellow and the red are significant because this shows that roughly 60 to 70%, if they haven't failed, they're probably failing or will fail. The graph on the right is even more significant because this shows global IT project statistics. The blue bars show the number of projects that succeed each year in dollars, and the red bars show the number of projects that fail each year. So what this tells us outright is that globally, as a global community, 1 out of every 2 projects fails. So these are and these are some of the challenges. That this is the crux of Agile. This is what we're trying to do with Agile methods. We're trying to improve project performance.
And would you say, Dr. Rico, that Agile, maybe this is one of the drivers for why Agile really came in initially through the IT world, even though it's transitioning right now into almost every other sector and industry, but the majority of case studies and examples and training has been focused on IT specifically because it really came in to solve this problem within IT. Is that true?
I think we've adopted, because so much of the world's economy, if you take Finland, for example, 90% of their GDP is information technology. So there has been a big focus. The home ground for Agile has been IT. But it really applies to knowledge work, research and development. Many, many wonderful books like from Jim Heisman that have focused on how to use Agile project management for non-IT. If you're making toasters, cars, anything innovative, anything creative, anything that requires knowledge work, Agile methods is an excellent paradigm.
So I want to engage the community. Since we talk about project failure, why do you think projects fail? I really want to ask you, and I don't want this to be theoretical. I want you to think about projects within your own company that have failed or have been challenged. Let's just say not an outright failure, but that have been challenged. Can you sort of, in the chat box, share with us what do you think have been the biggest drivers for that failure? And we're just going to take a look at some of your responses over here real quickly, and we'll get back. So poor management, sponsor indifference, lack of funding, planning and estimating, scope control, lack of communication, poor requirements, too many silos, lack of operational engagement, lack of clear focus, vague requirements, poor direction, too much government, requirements from the business does not get properly communicated to the developer, late of project integration, wrong business focus, bad and slow communication, unknown solutions, indecision, scope management, very good. Poor estimating, I love it. Those are really very, very good in terms of the common challenges. So I'm going to go through and just share with you what we've seen in terms of a lot of the work that we've done with various organizations. The drivers for Agile, why organizations are moving to changing their methodology, is they have a large backlog of work that's not getting done very effectively or efficiently. They have constantly changing business priorities. They have silos and handoffs and heavy processes, lack of trust and communication between the departments. There's slow time to market. Customers are really getting tired of waiting too long to receive anything. They have missing, incomplete, changing, ambiguous requirements. The lack of focus, and I think a few of you mentioned this, multitasking several projects all at the same time actually results in none of them getting done effectively. Lack of enterprise capacity measurement, and I'm very passionate about this topic as it relates to portfolio management. An organization doesn't know what their capacity really is because the way that we're calculating capacity today is wrong, which is by resource and by hour. But there's a separate webinar that we have on Agile Portfolio Management that sort of challenges you to think differently about capacity. Wasteful meetings, and I'm sure all of you will probably raise your hand if I said, how many meetings do you go to per week that are just wasted? They're just discussion meetings, there's no result. You know, Agile's view of meetings is they need to be working sessions that actually deliver value. There's a lot of problems with quality and rework, unrealistic estimates and due dates set by the wrong people, heavy engineering and testing processes that are not very efficient and have no automation, lack of empowerment. So people are not engaged. And you know, I read a study one time that said that a lot of the team members that are on projects that are failing actually know the project's failing, but they won't say a word about it because they're told to always report green on the status until it's too late. Specialized roles, so not my task thinking. You know, I only do one thing and I do it well. Lack of trust between business and IT or business and the team that's executing. And then overproduction, working on a lot of wasteful features. So when someone asks, you know, should I move to Agile? The question is, have you experienced any of the issues on this page? And of course there's more and different issues, but have you experienced any of these? Because these are really symptoms of an underlying problem. So this is sort of the drivers for Agile. Now, when we look at the main shift in thinking between Agile and waterfall versus traditional, I really want to emphasize that traditional processes assume incorrectly that you can fix the requirement, that you can constrain the requirements, and many times they actually try to constrain the requirements, the cost, and the schedule. But what ends up normally shifting is the cost. We either go over budget or we miss the date. Agile's philosophy from a planning perspective is you got to think differently about this. You really need to think about fixing the cost or fixing the schedule. So give me a due date, a drop dead deadline where we need to release to production, or give me your actual fixed cost that we can't go over. But then realize the reality that features will always have to change. There has not been one project where scope hasn't somewhat changed, and we're really talking about down to the story level. So even though maybe scope is fixed in terms of the features and the epics that need to be delivered, but when you get down to slicing these requirements into small stories, stories are always negotiable in any project because you can do them a different way. And so what Agile says is, why don't you focus on value? Instead of trying to get everything done and have people sign off on getting this big brain dump of requirements completed, why don't you focus on the top value features? And so from a planning perspective, Agile and Lean's mindset, it's value-driven versus plan-driven. So this is sort of the fundamental shift in mindset. Dr. Rico, tell us a little bit about the waste that you've seen and what this is telling us from a statistic perspective.
Well, this is also another interesting study by Standish, and it's underutilized. What this shows here in blue and red here is that about 60 to 70% of all requirements, that is all features that are built into today's products, are never used once by their customers. If you think of something like Microsoft Office, it took nearly 2 decades, $100 billion to develop, and over 90% of those features are never used. I use Microsoft Word every day, multiple times per day, and I use less than 1% of the features. And this translates into corporate intranets. Recent studies have shown that over 95% of web pages on corporate intranets of Fortune 500 firms are never visited once. So this is a big problem. You know, when you have too many requirements that your customers don't even need, this is going to lead to schedule delays, cost overruns, poor customer satisfaction, security vulnerabilities, just all sorts of problems by over-engineering today's products and services.
You know, and I feel that a lot of this comes from the traditional process that mandates that all requirements have to be written up front and signed off and sealed. I think that philosophy of forcing the customer to do an entire brain dump of everything they could possibly want, because we're going to put it in the contract and we're going to have you sign off on it, and scope creep will be an issue later on. I think, in my opinion, that's really what's resulted in a lot of this waste. Would you agree that it's something similar to that whole brain dump, that whole give me everything you possibly think that you may want, that's really resulted in this waste?
Absolutely. Traditional methods for the last 5 decades have been requirements driven, and there seems to be no end in sight. Almost every other methodologist I meet every day, the first word out of their mouth is how much money, how much time, how many years are we going to spend documenting requirements? That's the wrong question to ask. Unfortunately, that's the way we've trained our engineers and developers for the last 5 decades.
One of the value propositions for Agile, and this is a famous, the 4 charts are from version 1, but I wanted to add from my own here a little bit more detail for you. When you look at the red line represents Agile, the black line represents traditional. If you're using waterfall or traditional methods, typically you have to go through requirements gathering, design, development, testing, and towards the end of the process is when you begin to see any value delivery. With Agile, Agile says from the very beginning and as quickly as possible through these iterations, we need to start delivering on actual customer requirements from the very beginning. And so how we do that is we deliver in small chunks, we deliver frequently, we deliver anything that's actually done, and that's why we have a very strong definition of done in Agile, which says it's got to be done, not done but. And done but means, well, the report is done, but I haven't sorted it yet, or the report is done, but it's just still missing data from XYZ field, or the report, the XYZ wall has been painted, but we just haven't sealed it. All of that is considered done but, and anything that gets added to this chart in terms of value has to be what we call done. The customer, the focus of the team the interesting thing also is our backlogs. When we write requirements in Agile, we don't take it down to a task level when we're putting it in the backlog. It's really at the story level. And stories are valuable small chunks, very small slices of value that can be delivered. When we're executing, we need to break them down into tasks, but we do focus on getting stories done. And so instead of finding a project plan that is very task focused, you'll find that a lot of our release plans are very story and value focused. From a visibility perspective, with traditional, you have high visibility at the beginning, and then you sort of don't see anything, and then you come back at the end again for testing. Now, with Agile, the idea here is high visibility throughout the entire process. And how we do that is we have iteration demos and sprint reviews, high level of customer engagement, continuous feedback from the customer all the time, and then visual information radiators that are posted in every wall. And if the teams are not co-located, then a lot of the online tools that allow you to have the big visual information radiators. From a risk perspective, which I really think risk and visibility relate to each other, you'll see that there's always high risk on a project, whether it's traditional or Agile. But because of the high visibility and the high communication and the delivery of business value, the risk is absolutely reduced throughout the project. Where here it stays high until towards the end. That's when you find out if your project is really going to red or not. An interesting conversation about red and green status in Agile. We've always coached that every project should start in red, and it should only earn green, where traditionally a lot of projects think that they should be in green and then only tell you that they're red at the end. What we say is if you haven't delivered any value, then you're still in red status. And some companies don't like the word red, so we say, fine, you can start in yellow. But basically, from a risk perspective, you should understand that a project should not be in green when it first started, when it hasn't delivered anything. So the frequent visibility, the automation, the focus on quality, the continuous inspection and adaptation of the plan, instead of coming up with estimates at the very beginning and sticking with the estimates, we basically look at the plan and continuously modify it until we hit the right date or find out what our real estimate is. And then from an adaptability perspective, there's a lot of flexibility in Agile continuously, where in traditional you can change requirements at the beginning, but once we've invested so much, it becomes very expensive and very hard. So tell us a little bit about this. You have done so much research, Dr. Rico, and I think it's been impressive how you've been able to bring all the surveys together. So tell us what you've found from all the surveys that are out there.
Okay, well, this actually just represents a small number of surveys, but that's good enough here. What this shows is really about 10 years worth of surveys. It says here data from 5,000 respondents, but it's really closer to 15 or 20,000 respondents. And it's really this bottom line here, this average. Basically, these surveys show 15,000 people are saying that 70% of them say that Agile methods increases their productivity. 65% of them say that Agile increases their quality. And over half of the 15,000 respondents over the last 20 years, or 10 years rather, show that Agile actually reduces cost. And we're going to come back to some of these numbers, so we won't roll them down, but these are what people who are actually using Agile methods for the last decade have shown. They're saying that Agile really has a positive impact on the bottom line. We're going to try to quantify some of these numbers a little bit later.
Wonderful. And I'm going to update this. So you're really saying this is about 15,000 up to 20,000 people that were surveyed.
That's right.
Perfect. So tell us about this. This looks very sophisticated, and this is where my head starts to hurt, but I'm sure this makes sense to you. So walk us through very quickly, how do we understand what you've done over here in terms of all these metrics and the formulas that you've used, and how do we really read this the right way?
Okay, well, we won't read the whole chart. We'll focus on these green and gold numbers up here in the upper right quadrant of the table here. What this basically shows, if you look under the red label that says traditional testing, basically it's the green and the gold number that are very significant. This says that an Agile project, a small to medium-sized Agile project, roughly costs about $500,000 US. The gold number just below it shows that using a CMMI level 5 process, that same project would take about $4 million. So immediately you can intuitively grasp that Agile projects are actually more cost effective and more efficient. So the red numbers below it show that basically for every dollar you spend on an Agile project, just a typical average project, you'll get about $6 to $7 in return on investment. That's what this table is showing. If you want to understand the math, feel free to study the rest of the formulas. The blue numbers are also significant. We won't dwell on those, but these are really good projects that do really, really good high-performance automated testing. They're not just average projects. And what we've seen is that the productivity performance over traditional is about 20 to 1. That is, for every dollar a high-performance Agile team invests in Agile methods, you'll get about $20 in return on investment.
Wow, it's very impressive, and I think that's the summary that you were going to talk us through over here. So, yeah, tell us a little bit more about this.
So this is just some of the data beyond those numbers right there. It sort of kind of shows the same thing. It just shows, if you look at the first column under total cost, it shows the cost of executing a project using ISO 9001, CMMI, software CMM, and you see that the Agile projects are much more cost effective. The benefits, all methodologies have benefits or we wouldn't use them, but the benefits of Agile methods are just overwhelming. And now we see the 20 to 1 figure again. So these are basically high-performing Agile projects, actually very, very.
And so a lot of people are going to say, oh, that's just too big of a number. There's just no way. But it sounds like you have crunched the numbers. You've looked at actual studies, actual surveys, real projects to come up with these numbers. Is that correct?
Right. All this data, especially in this table here, it's not survey data. These are actual case studies, actual Agile projects. People went in and said, hey, we executed a traditional project, we executed an Agile project, and this was our average. Now, this is average performance. That means there are going to be some projects that are a little bit under 20 to 1, and conversely, there's going to be some projects that are over 20 to 1. We've actually seen some projects say that for small, high-performing projects, those numbers are like 30 or 40 to 1.
Excellent.
Those are just average rates.
So this is a graph, and the graph really just basically is just the same summary of the data that we just saw over here. But for those of us that are not very technical in terms of some of these numbers, tell us about what each one is telling us at a high level. So what does NPV and BEP and ROI, just tell us a little bit so that we understand how to read this. And this was a wonderful picture created by people10.com. So tell us a little bit more.
Let's walk through some of these graphs very quickly. If we look at the top left, the cost benefits here, it's the blue bar. I would like all the audience focus on the blue bar. So what this says over here, the blue and the orange, if you look at the cost number, the one on the extreme left here, it shows that the cost of Agile methods is very low, where the cost of CMMI, that's the orange bar, is higher, significantly higher. The benefits, we see that the benefits of Agile, the next blue bar, are very high, where it's a little bit above CMMI. Now, when we go over to the cost-benefit ratio, the middle graph, we see that the cost-benefit ratio for Agile is higher than CMMI, blue higher than orange. When we go over to the right, we look at the return on investment, and when we compare the ROI of Agile versus CMMI, we see that it's significantly higher. Then, of course, NPV, all good project managers use net present value, not just ROI. We see that when you discount the cash flows, we see that Agile methods, even under discounted cash flows, are still higher than CMMI. And this middle bottom one is kind of sneak up on you. This is the break-even point. You can't even see the blue bar. What this shows is that in millions of dollars, it roughly takes about $500,000 to break even on a CMMI project, where the cost of executing Agile, you can actually break even very, very quickly with just a few $1,000s of investment. And of course, the bottom right is just real options. So when you compare real options to NPV, we see that using real options formula, the benefits are actually greater than using the NPV formulas.
And when we are comparing Agile to CMMI, are we still also comparing it to Waterfall, would you say, or is it different levels of CMMI? When people are saying, so this is Agile compared to CMMI, how does it compare to Waterfall? What would you say?
Well, I think the CMMI and software CMM and ISO 9001 are very representative of waterfall paradigms. Obviously, software CMM is going to have better, or CMMI is going to have better performance over your typical waterfall. So I would say that the benefits over a typical waterfall are probably going to be greater.
Greater. Okay, very good. Tell us a little bit about this. This is a recent study, just 2012. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, this is actually new data. We just discovered this a few weeks ago. This is also by Standish. We've been saying for 20 years that one of the primary goals of Agile methods is to improve your success, the success of delivering something to your customer so that your customer will be satisfied. And this is by Standish. What the left pie chart shows is that Agile projects actually succeed 3 times more often than traditional projects, so a 3-to-1 ratio, right? And the right pie chart shows it has a bigger red, segment. It shows that traditional projects actually fail 3 times more often. I'll put a big concern, and I'll let Sally address this, is in both Agile and traditional projects, you seem to have a big segment of projects that are challenged. Only Sally can explain some of this.
Yeah, I was going to just share a little bit. This is from version 1's 2011 study. I would say that the majority of Agile projects that are challenged, from what I've seen, is because they're not really applying the Agile mindset. I've seen a lot of organizations move to Agile, but what they think Agile is a bunch of practices. So they're focused on the stand-up meetings, the post-it notes, creating the backlog, breaking down stories, which are all great things. But they have not shifted their mindset. They haven't understood that it is really about collaboration, that you can't, I've seen companies that have forgotten completely about sustainable pace, and they work people to death within the Agile world. And I've seen a lot of companies that have also, before they have even practiced Agile the right way, before they have even, what I always say, if you like my cake, if I've baked a chocolate cake, and you really like this cake, I'm going to give you the recipe, and you really should attempt at least once or twice to use the recipe, and then begin to modify it, right? Begin to change the recipe so that it's your chocolate cake. There are many companies that before they even apply some of the basic Agile principles, they will modify Agile immediately, customize it, tailor it, change it, say we don't need the stand-up, we don't need the retrospective, no, we don't need to really have that planning meeting. And this is what I have personally seen in terms of the challenge, is the lack of true understanding of Agile, general resistance to change, and so I agree with a lot of what version 1's come up with over here. The organizational culture is very command and control. They don't want to let go. Managers still want to manage the tasks for individuals. They don't want to have the team own their own tasks. Not having the right skill. I mean, doing Agile on your own, a lot of people just pick up the book and sort of figured it out as they go. But Agile is hard to do because it is an organizational change, and it is a shift in mindset. So not having experts or anyone that you've hired that can help you with that is also a challenge. Management support when they don't understand Agile, their fear of losing control, and then the complexity of projects. So I think that as you see more and more maturity happen within the Agile world, you'll see the success rate definitely grow. So this is another summary slide. Tell us a little bit more about this one, David.
I won't spend a lot of time. This kind of summarizes some of the earlier survey tables and case study tables we saw earlier. But of the 15,000 respondents, if you look at the left set of 3 bars, this just shows that 67% of the respondents are saying, hey, Agile increases productivity. 65% of them are saying it increases quality. Half of them say it reduces cost. If we look at the middle 3 bars, these are the actual cases, about 130 actual Agile projects where they said that using Agile more than doubled their productivity. And the green bar continues to be very significant. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. This is actual project performance. Using Agile methods improved their quality, reduced the number of defects by 75%.
Yeah, and I love this chart because it shows survey, which is just people's opinion, but these are actual case studies, and then versus CMMI actual case studies. So it's a really good graph from a summary perspective. And then what is this one telling us? And I know this is from QSM, Michael Ma.
Right. This is an independent study. This is actually in collaboration with Rally Software and QSM.
Mm-hmm.
But they basically compare 23 projects to their database. They make a cost estimating tool. At that time, this was 3 or 4 years ago, they had 7,500 projects in their database, and they compared statistically the performance of Agile versus traditional. And on the top left quadrant, it shows that in their database, Agile projects were 60% less expensive, right? The top right graph shows that they required 40% fewer people to execute the same project, right? And the bottom left said that they were about 25% faster, a little disappointing. But the bottom right graph continues to be the really important one, and we'll talk about this when we close the brief. In their database, this is not survey data, this is not case study, this is QSM and Rally software show that, Agile projects actually had 90% fewer defects. So this is corroborating all the earlier studies that using Agile methods will actually improve your quality, not decrease your quality.
And I would say, from my personal experience and our company's personal experience helping organizations, I think this is a direct contributor to the lower cost, because a lot of projects have high costs, and even after they release to production, they still have a ton of defects post-production that they have to fix, where Agile's main goal is you have to get it right the first time through continuous testing so that it really is done by the time it moves to production. So this is also, in my opinion, really contributes to the lower cost and getting it done faster. Now, a lot of companies that are still not convinced, you've got numbers over here that speak to the CIOs and the CEOs and the CFOs. So tell us about bottom line performance with agility.
This is actually an MIT study, and a lot of executives, and C-level executives, they really like this data. What MIT did was they studied, several Fortune 500 firms. They studied 15, Agile versus non-Agile Fortune 500 firms, and of those firms whose IT departments used Agile methods, those firms had 36% better earnings on the stock market. So this is bottom line performance. This is not Dave and Sally saying, hey, we're faster, we're fewer defects, we're lower cost. This is actual stock market performance. So a lot of executives sort of resound with this particular study.
Well, I think it's just the bottom line, right? All these other things are great, but it finally has to impact the bottom line. And I know of a lot of companies and angel investors that only invest in companies that are using Agile because they know of these numbers. They know that the earning potential is much higher. So it's very, very good numbers to show over here. I'm going to go through these quickly because we've already sort of covered a lot of this, but for all of you that wanted more and more data, Forrester 2009 said 67% of their respondents said that Agile has improved frequency of their product releases, and so they're getting time to market's definitely increased here. Increasing productivity in the 2008 report by 74%, 66% that the reduction in cost, 57% improve in the execution capabilities, so much more collaboration by Forrester reported. Version 1, again, back in 2008, said 83% of organization improved transparency and high-level visibility of the project itself. And then the benefits, again, version 1 is also famous, in addition to Rally and QSM, for their surveys, their State of the Agile Development Survey. When you download, we have a link for you to download this presentation at the end. I've also, in the zip file, I've put the latest 2011. And what it says over here, if you focus on this area, ability to manage changing priorities, improve project visibility, productivity, team morale, time to market, better alignment. A lot of people that say, why should we transform to Agile? Well, here's the benefits. I mean, here's what companies are actually saying that they've seen. And it's interesting that even with distributed teams, a lot of people say, well, Agile won't work because we have a distributed team. Well, a distributed team is a challenging reality of what your company's decided to do, right? It's the reality of organizations today. Agile will absolutely help. It got 41% say that it got better because of the high frequency of collaboration, communication, video conferencing, and all of it. Tell us a little bit about this. What are the industries out there that are using Agile, David, that you've seen?
This is only a small cross-section of projects. Sally and I are actually One of Primavera's biggest benefits was improved morale, right? People stopped quitting because they weren't working as hard and working these insane hours to do the same amount of work. The third line is very, very significant because this shows the food and drug industry. These are safety critical medical devices. People are using agile methods to build some of what we call class 3, certified medical devices. And a lot of people say, well, you can't use agile medical devices, airplanes, you can't use it for automotive electronics. We're using it in all of those fields. The fourth line just shows law enforcement, the FBI, the other law, the antitrust division, the Department of Justice, the CIA, the other law enforcement agencies are using it on some of their largest projects. And the DoD, the bottom line, today 50 to 70% of all DoD projects now use agile methods. And not just to build IT systems, those are the easy ones, but to build fighter jets and bombers and missiles and helicopters and satellites and things like that. So we just see expanding use of agile methods for large mission and safety critical projects, domains that people said, you can't use agile. We're using agile every day.
So this is the success story for the FBI, the project that you just talked about, the Sentinel. After almost a decade of mismanagement and waste at the FBI, its CIO turned the agency's misaligned case management implementation into an agile project. This was a really large project. From what I've read, it had failed several times, and it cost millions of dollars even before this $400 million. I think it was originally a $300 million, and then it turned to a $400 million budget, and then it also failed. This was a great article that you can read, a paper by Jason Bloomberg that just sort of documents that case study and talks about how the large government contractor that had it before that used a lot of the traditional methods, it failed, and when Agile came in, they did attribute a lot of the success to the Agile methods. So that was a very good case study to know by the government, by the FBI. And also from this perspective, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that was Sentinel was a CMMI level 5 contractor. So this started out with a CMMI level 5 organization and had to be rescued by a Scrum team. Continue on, Sally.
You know what's funny is a lot of people say Agile rescued a $400 million project. How could it be? Agile's all about cowboy coding, and so we just wanted through this webinar to give you a lot of statistics and prove that no, Agile is not what people are saying it is. The Department of Defense, the CIO, Terry Takai, am I saying that correctly? Terry Takai has his new mission statement: to deliver agile and secure information capabilities to enhance combat power and decision making. The DoD is looking to reduce spending by $500 billion. The GAO reports that the Department of Defense, NASA, and I know NASA because we've talked to them, U.S. Patent Trademark Office, we actually did Agile training for the GAO themselves. The VA, IRS are all moving towards Agile, and obviously it's because we need to start cutting costs. We need to be more efficient, effective. And again, another great article over here that you can read more about. The CIO, the former CIO for the whole federal government, had began sort of the Agile journey, Vivek, by talking about light technologies, usable functionalities that need to get delivered every 6 months. And the new federal CIO, Stephen, he is also talking about running our projects in a lean startup mode and embracing modular development. So the movement in the government for Agile is real, and it will be here to stay because the numbers speak for themselves. This is more information that I wanted to show you, that Agile is not just for government, Agile is not just for IT, but Agile is also for marketing. I really love HubSpot, and I found a wonderful article or presentation that they had that's called Go Agile or Go Home, Introducing Marketing the Agile Way. And this is a great place for you to go and read this. But they really showed you how they use Agile within their own company. As a HubSpot salesperson, I need a way to prioritize my active trials so that I can connect with my prospects most likely to buy. And some of the acceptance criteria is define what an active trial is, create a HubSpot report, publish. So these are like acceptance criteria. This is the story. This is the priority. The points, which is how complex that story is. So the story in Agile does not have to be a technical IT story. I mean, as a matter of fact, I remember when my sister was getting married, we put together a backlog for her wedding. Agile is a way of managing work. Agile is a way of organizing a backlog of important deliverables and figuring out how do we get through this in the most effective, efficient way. There's actually a book called Personal Kanban, and it talks to you about how to use a Kanban wall and how to use a Kanban system to organize your own personal to-do list. So when you begin to see this, you will understand that Agile is a shift in mindset. It's a different way of thinking about organizing and getting things done that really focuses on breaking things down into small chunks, sizing them without our estimates, but sizing them relatively, and then executing on them on fixed time boxes or not using Kanban, and limiting work in progress so that you're not working on 100 things at the same time so you can actually be effective. There are more and more companies that are doing Agile for marketing. There's also a movement out there, and this is a link for some of the other organizations that are doing that. Agile For, I always get this question. Does Agile work for hardware? Does Agile work for construction? Does Agile work for non-IT? So we will have a separate webinar that sort of talks about more case studies, but I did want to give you some links. This was a great article that had the top 10 questions people ask when moving to Agile for hardware. How does Agile apply to hardware? There are great reports. Those are a couple of links that I'm sharing with you for the construction industry. Right here in Omaha, Nebraska, we actually have a large retail center. It was really also a housing community that was built here in Omaha, I'm sure multi-billion or multi-million dollar, and it was using 6-week iterations and a combination of Lean and Agile. Suncourt Bank is using Agile for their finance and procurement teams. There are in-house lawyers at Lonely Planet. AccuRev has trained their sales teams to use Agile. So Agile is definitely being used for more and more industries, and again, it's because it's a way of organizing work, it's a way of thinking. I really have fun with this, David, and I wanted you to sort of tell me, have you heard this before? Agile won't work for us because, you want to just talk through a couple of these if you don't mind, what you've seen?
Right. I think probably the first two or three are the ones that I really run into most often. People still believe to this day, after 10 years, that Agile methods are really just for undisciplined programmers, what they call cowboy coders, or perhaps small projects, as we see in the second box, or only for prototypes. These are the ones that really, really bother people.
The one that I have fun with always is when people tell me they're moving from waterfall, which had heavy planning, heavy requirements gathering, heavy design and architecture, and then when they move to Agile, they sort of jump into no architecture, no requirements, and I have seen projects do that, and I think that's what sort of started this idea that there's no architecture, no requirements in Agile. When you listen to any of our previous webinars, like the journey through the Agile life cycle, we walk you through the actual life cycle where you do have to do release planning. You do need an iteration 0 to have some fundamental architecture. But the difference is it's just enough as opposed to the deep dive, the detail, spending 3 to 4 months just doing that. We say just enough so that we can get started. A lot of Agile project teams have actually given feedback that they have way more documentation now. There's a lot of discipline documentation. The difference is it's valuable documentation. It has a lot of Agile modeling and models and graphs and diagrams and pictures instead of the heavy, 25-page use case document that outlines every single thing in detail. The documentation's been much lighter weight, much higher value, actually consumable by the developers and by the team that needs to. I've also seen a misunderstanding that if you can't deliver in small chunks, in incremental delivery, then you can't do Agile. And I've had to explain this to a lot of people that even if you cannot deliver in less than 6 months, let's say, your system really does need 6 months before it can move to production. Nothing stops you from using Agile from the iterative perspective. Within the 6 months, you're going to break down all your work to 2 to 3 iteration increments and get the work done in small iterative. So don't mix iterative development with incremental delivery. You can decide when you want to release. Agile also helps you figure out how you get the work done until you release to production. Can you talk about the security concerns? Some people say, when we're doing Agile, there's hijack issues and security issues. What's your take on that?
Well, that actually has a number of dimensions. It relates back to quality. People that smaller architecture, smaller design, we have a smaller attack surface. So we have fewer windows and doors by which, hackers and other people can compromise our systems. But we still have to do, we have to have security requirements, we have to do threat modeling, we have to do vulnerability testing. Agile does not alleviate us from having to do certain fundamental security engineering practices.
Exactly.
As a matter of fact, with continuous integration with Agile's automated testing model, we can actually do more security testing at a lower cost than we can do manually with traditional.
The other two that I have fun with is when someone says, nope, we can't do Agile because we don't have a 100% dedicated customer. What I want to let you guys know is there's a lot of teams that don't have a 100% dedicated customer, but they at least have a very highly engaged customer. Now, having a 100% dedicated customer is what's going to optimize and give you the highest value. There is absolutely no doubt. But some teams that have had a 50% allocated customer, co-located as much as possible, or at least engaged virtually as much as possible with the team, that has also worked. So have you been on projects that have not had a 100% dedicated customer but still been successful? David?
Oh, absolutely. We do that all the time in the government. This is a problem with the government because there's actually more contractors or consultants than there are government workers. So we have to use proxies and product owners, that actually act on behalf of the customer. And Scrum methods like Scrum give us those proxies. So Agile methods have mechanisms for dealing with this type of situation.
And our reports are not just on Post-it notes on the wall. There are several wonderful tools out there that Agile teams use all the time. Version 1 that we talked about today, Rally, and so many others, Jira, and Lean Kit, Kanban. What are some of the other popular ones that you've heard out there?
Yeah, I think you've hit the high ones, version 1, Rally. There's some open source tools that are very popular, but also don't just look at the project management tools, look at the testing tools. Since Agile is a very testing intensive methodology, your tools are going to report the number of defects, the number of design flaws, the number of vulnerabilities, the number of past test reports,
Yes.
the number of failed test reports. So your testing tools are going to give you a lot of the feedback that your distributed teams are going to need to know whether your project is succeeding or not.
And if you already have, for example, you're already using .NET, then TFS has been amazing, right, from Microsoft Team Foundation Server in terms of a fully integrated, automated environment, and IBM also has their IBM Team Concert. So there's more and more tools out there. We're not going to go through this because we just answered a lot of that, but the reality checked is Agile is being used with architecture and some of the answer to some of these myths. News for people that didn't know it, Gartner has predicted that 80% of all software projects will be moving Agile to the next in the next couple of years. And the other key input for you is PMI. I mean, PMI's moved to Agile, right? PMI as an organization has PMI.org uses Scrum. They are fully supporting the new PMI Agile certification, which is the PMI ACP. And I believe even from Priya, who's the product manager, said that it's one of the fastest growing certifications since launch in terms of the number of people that have joined the pilot and applied to get certified right now. The interesting statistics around the Scrum Masters. This is the number of Scrum Masters, and I think you said it's over 200,000 right now, David, right? That are certified.
From 2010 to 2012, we jumped from 100,000 certified Scrum Masters to over 200,000 today. So interest in Agile methods continues to grow. This is probably one of the newer and most astonishing statistics.
Right, and I know the PMI ACP is also going to grow, or there's big hopes for it growing tremendously with a lot of the current PMPs also acquiring that, so they begin to learn the Agile methods. Who's doing Agile? Honestly, the question is who's not doing Agile. That would be an easier list to come up with. Everyone, I mean, a lot of the Fortune 500s, and I'm not saying that they're doing it well. We're saying that they're beginning to dabble into Agile methods, and there's different levels of maturity related to Agile. And actually, one of our upcoming webinars will be the transformation roadmap. How do you begin to adopt Agile? We'll talk about our three-step process that we normally go through with organizations in terms of piloting Agile, scaling Agile, and then doing enterprise transformation. And these companies are various stages of their maturity as it relates to all of that. why does Agile work? And I wanted to really share this with you because it's very, very important. What organizations are missing today is clarity. A lot of companies want to know, what should we work on? Why should we work on it? When? And what is the order? So everything can't be high priority. There needs to be a ranked list at the enterprise level, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, of the projects that need to get done so that people can have clarity around what they need to do. People also within an organization need the ability to focus. What do I mean by focus? Can we actually stay focused until something gets done? Because the problem with clarity is you tell me what you need me to get done, but then you need to allow me the focus to get it done. You can't keep bringing in new priorities, new tasks, and confuse me. And so clarity and focus feed into also execution. Execution means that we need a method that we can deliver customer value predictably, not impromptu, not always often on schedule. What is a very systematic, iterative way that we can constantly, predictably understand our velocity and deliver? On top of fixing those three issues, which are the major process issues that Agile really addresses, in the middle, how can we be a happy and healthy organization while we are doing it? And this is really where the organizational change management transformation happen. And this is a very important slide for us because as we walk organization through the transformation, these are the areas that we like to focus on in terms of, do you have clarity, focus, execution, and have you created a culture that is a high-performing culture that can do this in a healthy way, in sustainable pace, with empowerment and engagement. So let's go ahead and take some questions right now. You can download this presentation from tinyurl.com/agile training. I've also put in a couple of other handouts for you, and would love for you to watch some of the videos that we have on agilevideos.com. This webinar will also be posted there. So talk to us. What questions can we answer for you?
Hey, Sally, real quick, just for everyone while we're switching gears, will we be able to post your presentation to our community?
Yes.
Like we normally do?
Absolutely. I've already uploaded this presentation here in a PDF, so we can absolutely do that. Yep. This all we do in the zip file download is we just give you a little bit more items, but absolutely, definitely.
Sure. That's good. And one last point for those who have been asking, we will be posting the PDUs within a few business days, so you folks don't need to worry about that. We will take care of it. So with that, Sally, we have a lot of different questions that have been coming in. Do you just want to take a look at maybe a few of those, and then maybe take some of those back to be able to respond back and post answers back if you like?
All right, we've got a few minutes, so let's see which ones can we answer quickly here. David, do you see any? There's a nice, good list here of very thorough questions, and I think Paul is summarizing them. How does Agile work with remote teams as against co-located?
That's actually a really good, and I'm sure Sally has some good answers. We're seeing that 70 to 80% of all projects worldwide are virtual teams, distributed teams. And Agile is working. It's not to say that there aren't any challenges with distributed teams, but Agile is actually helping those teams in many studies, many statistics. So Agile does scale to global teams. Do you want to add anything to that, Sally?
No, that sounds right. Why is it that failure year on the verdicts initial slides has no success rate better as the years are more than 2 years? I think what people were saying is that does Agile fail more for a 1-year project versus the 2-year project? It looks like the success rate is better for 2-year projects than 1-year project in the data. Is there any specific years that help in the success rate with Agile?
I don't remember seeing that particular statistic, but obviously, if you have a smaller scope and slower risk, you're going to be more successful. So that's the key is you want to keep your iterations, you want to keep your releases as small, you want to deliver your highest ROI user stories first. So obviously, the bigger, the longer the project, the higher your failure rate in any method, whether it's CMMI or ISO 9001 or IDLE. The bigger the project, the less likely you are to be successful.
We see a lot of rework from testing in Agile. Is this a correct statement?
I think if it's done poorly, we saw that early about 10 years ago where people were using some of the manual practices, but they weren't really embracing the Agile testing model where every requirement has one or more tests, every requirement sins we have to go back and teach Agile projects how to do testing right the first time.
If you constantly adapt the planning, where is the baseline to compare to the end? Constantly adapting the plan must result in a point landing. Does that mean shading the outcome? I can answer this. If you look at our previous webinar that we did, the journey through the Agile life cycle, I showed a burn-up chart that we used to track the metrics, where it did show you how the original points that were estimated versus actual. And so in that burn-up chart, again, just watch that webinar, a journey through the Agile life cycle, or a day in the life of an Agile life cycle. You'll see the burn-up chart that does have the baseline versus what the team targeted versus what they actually got done. Let's see, do we have one more? How do I adopt Agile as an independent application developer? It is going to be, so Agile is an organizational transformation method, really. It works best when you have management support. However, individually, what you can do is begin to learn about Agile. You can begin to learn about test-driven development. You can begin to ask questions such as, how can I understand the actual business value of what I'm delivering? But I haven't seen Agile successfully, for example, one person only on the team, or even just one department. Let me just have the developers do Agile, but the testers won't do Agile. That's been very, very challenging, because Agile really at the heart of it is the cross-functional team that needs to come together. But what I would say, Nasser, is that you could learn Agile and begin to influence your team in terms of understanding the value and your management, the value of Agile, so that you were at least allowed to try it on a pilot. And that's how we normally do Agile, is we pick a pilot project and say, can we just do Agile the right way on this pilot? You can check out agilevideos.com for some simple learning and have your team do that too. Let's see. What is the terminology? What is the difference between terminology traditional, waterfall, and Agile? So when we say traditional, waterfall, and Agile, what is the difference in terminology? I can take that, or you can take it, David. When we say the word Agile, we're referring to Agile, Lean methods, Kanban, Scrum, Extreme Programming. Any of these methods are sort of lumped in a general umbrella. Waterfall was the specific, requirements gathering, design, analysis, the very specific phased approach with handoffs. Traditional means it could be a mix of waterfall, CMMI, and many of the other traditional methods. And we are out of time today, folks. Thank you so much for joining. And I really hope that you enjoyed this webinar. If you don't mind, give us your feedback on the chat. Did this meet your expectation?
And feel free to email any one of us with any questions you have, and we'll follow up with you.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Sally and David. This was great. We really appreciate you sharing with us today. And thank you again to all of our attendees. Again, very much appreciate your time today, your feedback. We'll make sure we'll save some copies of these questions and share these with Sally and David so that the two of you can respond ongoing. And again, as Sally said, she's got the information here on some of her links and her site, David's contact info. We'll also be posting the information up in our community site. And keep an eye out, Sally has posted a new blog on our site, as well as we have upcoming webinars in the series. So definitely, when you get a chance, take a look at the Learning Education Development Community, Sally, and we'll have more information posted. So thank you again, everyone. Really appreciate your time today.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.